Nestled within the serene Austrian Alps, the village was a picturesque haven of tranquility, characterized by quaint chalets with sloping roofs blanketed in pristine snow. Cobblestone streets wound their way through the settlement, lined with glowing lanterns that cast a warm, inviting glow against the alpine chill. Surrounded by towering pine forests and majestic mountain peaks, the village seemed like a timeless jewel, untouched by the bustle of the outside world. The village was home to young Lucas Müller. He was notorious for his mischievous deeds. Cunning and deceitful, he often tricked his parents and unfairly blamed his younger sister for his own wrongdoings. In one incident, when his father discovered the gate unlocked and their beloved cow missing, Lucas quickly defended himself, saying, "Just check our hands. Mine are clean, but my sister's got dirt on hers from playing outside." Despite her tears and protests, their parents, blinded by affection, never doubted Lucas's words, remaining oblivious to his deceitful nature. As winter cloaked the village, the fateful night of December 5th arrived. Krampusnacht, or Krampus Night, occurs the night before the celebration of the feast of St. Nicholas, bringing with it an air of dread and whispering legends. This was the night when Krampus, the shadowy enforcer of Yuletide order, would come to punish the naughty. While other children eagerly anticipated the Krampus parade, their eyes filled with excitement, this boy found himself trembling not from cold, but from a mix of fear and guilt. As the village buzzed with excitement, Lucas couldn't bring himself to join in the festivities. Despite the allure of the Krampus parade, he felt a heavy weight on his conscience due to his past misdeeds. He remembered the times he'd deceived his parents and blamed his younger sister for his own wrongdoings. The guilt of his actions and the fear of facing Krampus because of his own naughtiness kept him away from the eager crowd. The village took on an eerie atmosphere as the streets came alive with a sinister parade. Men dressed as terrifying Krampuses, their faces hidden behind grotesque masks, would march through the cobblestone streets, brandishing birch branches and mercilessly whipping any naughty children they encountered. The crack of the branches echoed through the chilled air, adding to the night's spine-tingling aura. Little did the villagers know that amidst the parade of imposter Krampuses, the real Krampus lurked in the shadows, his true identity concealed from the unsuspecting crowd. He had come to the village on this night, not only to join in the terrifying revelry, but also to seek out the truly naughty children, those who deserved his dark judgment. Lucas couldn't ignore the eerie sound of bells, ringing ominously in the distance, like a foreboding sign or omen that something bad was about to happen. His heart raced with a mix of fear and anticipation as he double-checked every lock on the doors and windows. In that split second of terror-stricken realization, the formidable figure of Krampus erupted into the room. The menacing clack of his cloven hooves on the wooden floor echoed like a death knell in the silent house. Lucas's eyes widened in horror as the monstrous creature loomed over him, his face contorted in a silent scream. Before he could react, he was roughly snatched and thrust into a dark, confining sack. All this transpired in mere moments, leaving his parents oblivious to the nightmare unfolding under their very roof. Lucas glimpsed the terrifying procession with another boy through a hole they made in the sack. Shadows with monstrous swagger roamed the streets, their movements grotesque and unnerving. They banged on neighbours' doors, their eerie sounds piercing the night. At the forefront of this horde stood the imposing figure of Krampus, orchestrating the chaos with a commanding presence. Krampus was a fearsome sight to behold. Towering over his minions, he was cloaked in dark, matted fur that bristled with each movement. His twisted horns, curling skyward from his ghastly head, gleamed under the moonlight, adding to his demonic aura. His face was a haunting blend of beast and man, with deep-set glowing eyes that burned with a malevolent fire. A long pointed tongue slithered menacingly from his grotesque, sneering mouth, dripping with anticipation of wicked deeds. In his gnarled hands he wielded a bundle of birch branches, bound together in a sinister makeshift whip, which he brandished with a cruel precision. Chains clanked and rattled around his waist, creating a chilling symphony that underscored the night's horror. The air around him seemed to warp and shiver, as if even the elements were recoiling in fear from Krampus's malevolent presence. After the festivity and parade died down, the demonic Krampuses convened in a remote clearing. There, Lucas was placed onto a bundle of birch branches, resembling an enormous broom, along with other children they collected from other villages. Each Krampus, grasping their own similar brooms, took flight into the night sky. Lucas was held tightly, ensuring he wouldn't fall during their ominous ascent, carried off to a distant, hidden lair high up in the Austrian Alps. Littered with bones and skulls, the cave sprawled before him, a vast and nightmarish abyss. It was a place where darkness clung to every crevice, and the very air seemed to weigh heavy with the stench of despair. At the heart of this hellish chamber, a gaping maw beckoned like a portal to the abyss itself, a wretched passageway into the depths where Krampus called home. The walls of the cave seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, as if they held the tormented souls of countless victims in their eternal embrace. The flickering light of torches cast eerie, dancing shadows that played tricks on the mind, and the faint, distant echoes of anguished cries seemed to whisper through the icy drafts, sending shivers down Lucas's spine. In this chamber of horrors, time itself appeared to stand still, and Lucas could feel the weight of centuries of dread pressing down upon him, a suffocating reminder of the grim fate that awaited those who crossed paths with Krampus. Confronted by Krampus himself,
"Lucas Miller, I've had my eye on you for quite some time now. You've been quite clever, locking the doors and windows to keep me at bay. But it seems even the cleverest can be betrayed by those closest to them."
"What do you mean? Who betrayed me?"
"Your sister, Lucas. She was so hurt by your deceit, by your blaming her for your own misdeeds, that she decided to take matters into her own hands."
"No, she couldn't have..."
"Oh, but she did. She left the front door unlocked after you had checked it the first time, and now, Lucas, you find yourself faced with a choice that will determine your fate tonight. Do you wish to be drowned, to be eaten, or to become one of my undead servants in the underworld? The decision, dear Lucas, is yours to make."
the boy's usual bravado dissolved into desperate pleas for mercy, promising to reform his ways. Krampus, with a sneer of disbelief, left to deal with other children, leaving the boy in despair. Lucas, his leg chained to the cavernous wall, witnessed the beginning of a sick, sinister game being played out around him. Twisted versions of childhood pastimes had been transformed into nightmarish trials for the naughty children who had met their unfortunate fate. In one corner, a grotesque form of hopscotch was underway. The game board etched into the cavern floor with jagged stones, and the squares seemed to writhe and shift as if alive. The children, their faces etched with terror, hopped from one cursed square to another, but every misstep resulted in a pitiful scream as they plummeted into the unfathomable darkness below. Elsewhere, a horrifying game of tug-of-war was being waged. The rope was not made of simple hemp, but seemed to be woven from the very nightmares of the damned. The children, with tears streaming down their faces, strained against an unseen force as they battled to avoid being pulled into the abyss. Their cries of desperation were met with cold, heartless laughter from Krampus and his malevolent minions, who revelled in the suffering they had wrought. In yet another corner, a nightmarish version of jump rope unfolded. The children, trembling, skipped over a cord made from thorny vines that seemed to writhe with a malevolent will of their own. With each jump, the vines lashed out, leaving bloody welts and torn flesh in their wake. The losers, their bodies marked by the cruel lashes, were cast into the pit, their sobs of pain a perverse serenade to Krampus's dark delight. Throughout these dreadful scenes, Krampus and his minions watched with cruel amusement. They sat at opposite ends, their eerie grins and gleaming eyes betraying a sadistic pleasure in the suffering of the children. Their guttural laughter echoed through the cavern, mingling with the agonized cries of the fallen. It was a grotesque and twisted spectacle, a nightmarish carnival of torment that would haunt Lucas's nightmares for the rest of his days. At his feet, a remarkable goat lay sprawled, its massive form nearly rivaling that of a horse. As the commotion in the cavern unfolded, the goat stirred, its eyes flickering with awareness. It was not free like Lucas. It was chained to the cavern wall, a prisoner much like the boy himself. However, Lucas soon discovered that he could communicate with the goat through an inexplicable telepathic connection. The goat introduced itself as Tangris Nier, revealing its tragic fate as Krampus's recurring meal for most of the year. Tangris Nier explained that after being consumed, it would miraculously be reborn the next day, enduring the cycle of torment again and again. It confided in Lucas that it despised being devoured by Krampus, reserving such a privilege for its true master, who remained lost. Lucas, the son of a blacksmith, had a resourceful mind and a knack for working with tools and iron scraps. He had pins concealed in his pockets, which he had used for mischievous purposes in the past. Realizing this unique skill could be their ticket to freedom, Lucas proposed a daring escape plan to Tangris Nier, in exchange for the goat's assistance in finding its long-lost master and liberating it from this nightmarish ordeal. Fueled by a newfound determination and the promise of redemption for his own past misdeeds, Lucas agreed to the perilous pact, setting the wheels of their audacious escape in motion. An undead servant, its pallid skin drawn tight over emaciated limbs, shuffled into the cell to collect Lucas for the next round of nightmarish games. Upon closer inspection, Lucas discerned hauntingly familiar features beneath the decaying flesh, realizing that this wretched creature had once been a boy of roughly his own age. A pang of sympathy briefly tugged at Lucas's heart as he contemplated the tragic fate that had befallen the young soul. However, there was no time for sentimentality. Their escape was imminent. With a silent signal, Lucas and the freed Tangris Nier sprang into action. The goat, now unshackled, delivered a powerful kick that sent the undead servant's head soaring through the air. Surprisingly, the severed body continued to move, its limbs twitching as it sought to fulfill its ghastly duty. Lucas grappled with the relentless creature, struggling to contain its eerie persistence. In a final, decisive act, Tangris Nier delivered a secondary, bone-crushing kick to the chest, sending the headless body hurtling into a dark, forgotten corner of the cavern, where it lay inert, its haunting presence finally vanquished. Lucas, with a surge of adrenaline, leaped onto the back of the extraordinary goat. His fingers sank into its soft, comforting fleece as he clung on for dear life. The moment he settled into position, the goat sprang into action with breathtaking speed. Bounding out of the cavern, the duo burst into the light of morning, greeted by an overcast sky that seemed to mirror the urgency of their escape. The heart-pounding ordeal had begun, and Lucas was immediately struck by the astonishing agility of his newfound companion. The goat navigated the treacherous terrain with grace, effortlessly leaping across narrow ledges and scaling sheer cliffs. Lucas clung to its back, his heart racing in tandem with each pulse-pounding leap. Behind them, the ominous sounds of Krampus's chains and the foreboding toll of his bells grew louder, signaling the relentless pursuit that dogged their every move. The alpine landscape blurred around them as they raced against both time and fate, the thrilling chase intensifying with each passing moment. Up ahead, on the horizon, a tempest seemed to be brewing. Lucas's instincts kicked in, guiding him toward the approaching storm. With each electrifying moment, he and the remarkable goat dared to outpace their malevolent pursuer, their flight taking on an exhilarating rhythm that danced on the edge of danger and adventure. As Lucas and the remarkable goat continued their daring escape, just when hope appeared to be slipping through their fingers, the heavens themselves seemed to answer their desperate prayers. With a thunderous earth-shaking roar, the sky above erupted into chaos. Amidst the tempestuous storm, a majestic chariot materialized, drawn by none other than the mighty Thor, god of thunder. The goat, Tangrisnir, recognizing his long-lost master, couldn't contain his joy. His bleat of recognition pierced through the tumultuous winds and rain as he rejoiced in being reunited with Tan Ginjo's tree, who now stood side by side at the front of Thor's chariot. However, Lucas couldn't help but notice that Thor appeared different from the robust figure of legend. Something about him seemed altered, less vibrant and vigorous than the stories had told. There was a subtle weariness in his countenance, a sign that time had left its mark. The moment of their heartwarming reunion was cut short as Krampus, relentless in his pursuit, emerged from the storm's fury. His chains and whips clashed against the tumultuous backdrop of the tempest, the very elements seeming to recoil in fear from his malevolent presence. It was a clash of supernatural forces, an epic showdown between darkness and divine power, with Lucas and his companions caught in the eye of the storm, their fate hanging in the balance.
Give us the boy and the goat, and we'll be on our way.
Then we have a problem because they are with me.
Ah, Thor, how the mighty have fallen. Your powers are not what they used to be. The people who once worshipped you are long dead, their beliefs faded into obscurity. But me, I am celebrated. Parents love me as I am, the harbinger of discipline for their unruly children. Even the children themselves are both marveled and terrified of me, ensuring my legacy.
You may be celebrated for now, Krampus, but I have not been forgotten. My time will come again.
As the hunting party, led by Krampus and his relentless minions, closed in on Lucas and Thor's chariot, the impending battle unfolded with a breathtaking intensity. The clash of supernatural forces reverberated through the majestic mountains, turning the alpine landscape into a theatre of fury and power. Krampus, his twisted form cloaked in dark matted fur, moved with ferocious speed and precision. His whips and chains lashed out like malevolent serpents, seeking to ensnare and subdue his adversaries. With every strike, the chains emitted a bone-chilling symphony that seemed to fuel the minions' savage zeal. The air around Krampus warped and shivered, as if even the elements themselves recoiled from his malevolent presence. Opposing this monstrous might, Thor, though still formidable, was not the powerhouse of old. The centuries had taken their toll on the god of thunder, and his once mighty vitality had waned. Nevertheless, he wielded his legendary hammer, Mjolnir, and summoned bolts of lightning to counter Krampus's onslaught. Yet to their dismay, the lightning was absorbed by Krampus's chains, rendering Thor's attacks ineffectual. With grim determination, Krampus and his minions pressed their advantage. The chains coiled around Thor's limbs and legs like unyielding anacondas, constricting his movements and sapping his strength. The relentless whipping by chains and sinister birch branches seemed endless, each strike punctuated by the agonized roars of the god. Krampus, in the background, watched the unfolding chaos with a malevolent glee that sent shivers down the spine. His deep-set, glowing eyes burned with sadistic satisfaction as he reveled in the torment he had unleashed. With a synchronized burst of power, Tangrisnir and Tangjoster, the two remarkable goats, gathered momentum and surged forward like a force of nature. Their massive forms became a relentless battering ram, crashing into the crowded ranks of Krampus's executioners with unyielding might. The impact was akin to a bowling ball striking a set of pins, sending the minions sprawling in all directions like discarded playthings. In a matter of seconds, the once coordinated hunting party dissolved into chaos, but Tangrisnir's focus swiftly shifted to the heart of the malevolent storm, Krampus himself. Charging with unwavering determination, Tangrisnir honed in on the horned enforcer of Yuletide order. The collision between goat and monster was cataclysmic, their forms becoming entangled in a gruesome embrace. As the momentum of the collision subsided, a grim tableau emerged. The chains that once had bound Krampus now coiled menacingly around the neck of the valiant goat, threatening to strangle him into submission. It was a harrowing sight, the very symbol of innocence and purity, locked in a deadly struggle with the embodiment of darkness and cruelty. With selfless determination, Tangrisnir made the ultimate sacrifice. In a final act of bravery, he flung himself and Krampus into the abyss below, the chains still coiled tightly around them. The deafening silence that followed was punctuated only by the haunting echoes of their descent into the depths, a poignant testament to the goats' unwavering loyalty and the price paid for their freedom. As the minions regrouped, their malevolent intentions clear and a thirst for revenge for their master's demise burning in their eyes, a sinister turn of events unfolded. Out of the darkness, a colossal troll materialized at their side, its grotesque form looming ominously. Thor, sensing the impending threat, wasted no time. He signaled for Tangjoster, the faithful goat, to connect to the chariot, and Lucas held on tightly, bracing for what was to come. Thor, with a thunderous roar, slammed his mighty hammer Mjolnir into the ground with an earth-shattering force. In an instant, the entire mountain seemed to shift and crumble around them, succumbing to the devastating power of Thor's divine wrath. The cataclysmic explosion was nothing short of monstrous, with the very earth itself trembling under the weight of the god's fury. Rocks and debris were sent hurtling, and a deafening roar filled the cavernous depths as the mountain's might was unleashed. With Thor at the reins and Lucas and Tangjoster in tow, the chariot soared through the expansive skies. Lucas couldn't help but express his sense of loss to the god of thunder. "I will miss Tangrisnir," he admitted, his voice tinged with sadness. Thor, his features still bearing the weariness of his encounter with Krampus, offered a reassuring smile. "Don't worry about him," he said with a reassuring tone. "He will be reborn again, and good as new, by tomorrow." It was a testament to the enduring cycle of the supernatural world. Curiosity piqued. Thor turned his attention to Lucas. "You were able to communicate with Tangrisnir," he remarked. "Do you have the blood of a Norse god in you?" Lucas shook his head emphatically. "No," he replied, humbled by the god's presence and the miraculous events of the night. Thor's gaze held a hint of knowing as he continued, "I will be watching you closely, Lucas." Lucas chose to focus on the breathtaking beauty of the Alps from above. The world stretched out before him in all its vastness, and in that moment, he realized the insignificance of his former misdeeds. It was a profound revelation that would shape his future. Lucas found himself back inside the familiar confines of his home, greeted by the warm embrace of his parents. Their happiness and gratitude were palpable, and they showered him with hugs and affection. Lucas couldn't help but feel a profound sense of relief and appreciation for his family. He turned to his younger sister, his heart filled with a mix of love and amusement. With a gentle kiss on her forehead, he leaned in and whispered, "I know it was you who unlocked the door, allowing Krampus to take me." Despite her guilt-ridden expression, Lucas couldn't hold on to any resentment. He hugged her tightly and forgave her, promising to be a better brother and to cherish their bond. As the family gathered around the table for their meal, the atmosphere was one of warmth and unity. Laughter and conversation filled the air as they shared stories of their adventures and misadventures. After the meal, they eagerly turned their attention to the exchange of presents. Lucas's sister unwrapped her gifts, revealing an assortment of dolls that brought a radiant smile to her face. It was then Lucas's turn, and he eyed a large box with gleeful anticipation, hoping it might contain the sleigh he had always wished for. With trembling hands and rising excitement, Lucas tore open the wrapping, only to be met with an unexpected surprise. The box revealed not a sleigh, but a box full of coal. His heart sank as he realized the nature of the prank. Inside, a mischievous note read, "I will see you next year," signed Krampus. Outside, hidden from their view, the face of Krampus contorted with wicked laughter, a malevolent presence reveling in the clever twist of fate and the enduring legacy of their encounter.